back to part 2 of the Adobe Bridge and Camera RAW workflow workshop. Here we are with the same folder as previously, and I'm going to select all of the images and double click now to open up within Adobe RAW. It will ask me if I want to do that, and of course I do. So just going to click OK. And here we can see the interface, which we currently have our scrollable thumbnails towards the bottom. So the first thing, starting at the bottom on the left, that I think would be useful is you have a fit in view, which is the same as Command 0, and then you have an option there to be able to increase the size that you would wish to work on, so you can see the detail of an image. Here we can see there's quite a lot of artifact because it's super zoomed in, and it was shot at an ISO of 1250. Okay, so with this here, you can select the scale you want to zoom into, and you can toggle between fit in view and the size that you wish to zoom into. Okay, and then you can scroll through the images, and here we have the option to hide the film strip or bring it back, and here we have the option to view and sort by capture date, file name, etc., similar to Bridge. And here we've got the option to filter photos, okay, by the various different tags, etc. So you can see doing this previously in Bridge would offer options to be able to expand your workflow within Camera RAW. And these are all kind of functions that align quite nicely, particularly with Lightroom, but also with Capture One. What I am going to do is then just say that also here we can have the option for star rating, and unlike Bridge, you just hit the numerical key that you want to give it a rating at and 0 to unrate, or you can use this here. The bin function will mark an image with an X, or bin, sorry, it's changed, with a bin, and it's marked it, it hasn't got rid of it. So if I press it again, hopefully we can uncheck it. So this is useful if you want to mark it for disposal, if you like. Okay, so at the top here we've got some important information. There's lots to go through, so I'm going to go through the key stuff. We have a histogram here that is affected with any of the exposure controls that we use in the basic function. And we can see there's some key information here with regards to how it was shot, metadata. And also, if you want a quick fix, we've got a button here for auto, which will just improve potentially on the image as Camera RAW sees fit, and also a black and white option, all for quick fixes. And here we have our color profiles, so you can use Adobe Color or any of these other options, including Vivid. So these are all kind of standard quick fixes, and I suppose it kind of ties in quite nicely with the functionality of many of the apps that we find on our smartphones, such as Instagram or Afterlight, etc., etc. Okay. Oh, also I think I'll go down slightly to browse, and we can see that you've got options that you can scroll through for not only the Adobe profiles, but also artistic profiles. So very easy to kind of make an instant change and see if you like that. But it really depends on your requirements and your approach to working with this environment. What's really useful to know is in the Basics tab here, what we have is a white balance. So you've got presets that pretty much match what you would likely find in most DSLR and mirrorless cameras. The white dropper or picker means that if you click on something white within your scene, or neutral to be honest with you, you click on that, you slightly change the white balance, and of course you've got the slider controls to cool it down or warm it up, and then change the spectrum between magenta and green. Double click on any of these slider controls to take it back to the original setting. Below this you have the exposure tab, which means that you can adjust the exposure compensation, and again I can take that back to as shot. I'm just going to take that down a little bit, and then you have contrast that kind of essentially gives it a little bit of pop. So all these things should be used subtly. So I'm going to bump up the contrast. I'm going to pull down the highlights to make some of these bright areas less bright. I want to pull in some shadow detail in the hair there, so I'm just going to pull in a bit of shadow detail and make it look a little bit more natural. Okay, and if I wanted to, I could pull in the blacks to make the blacks darker, but I don't. So I rarely use the blacks. And it's the same with the whites. The whites is essentially what would be previously regarded as brightness. So you can brighten the midtones or dial down the midtones, and it's the same with the blacks. You're essentially dealing with the midtones on both of those. Okay. What I do find quite useful is the texture. So it's useful to then just zoom into this to see the texture, and texture means that you're going to get a kind of a degree of, I'll pump it all the way up, a degree of detail that exists within the image, and it's particularly noticeable in any fine detail that you have. If I take it all the way out, we can see it softens it. So it's finding the balance. I normally find somewhere between +2 and +10, dependent on the image. Clarity does a similar thing, and you should be used to this in Instagram. Clarity though can make things really harsh and then soften it down. Personally, if I'm going to use it, I would only use it by about +1 or 2. I tend not to use it. And dehaze, not necessarily useful for this particular image, but it does have a relevance if you've got an image that is, for example, for landscapes where you might have mist and fog or stray light coming through, and it just refines it slightly. What can be useful is the vibrance and the saturation. So vibrance removed takes the image not quite to black and white. What it tends to do is it kind of tries to keep the more natural colors. You can see you can get quite a look, almost like a bit like color grading, or you can pump it up and you can see we've overdone those natural colors accordingly. And the saturation just boosts any color elements or completely desaturates, so you can kind of create a starting place for black and white images. So with it desaturated, you can then go and work on things like contrast and even white balance to affect the look of things in monochrome, if you like. So that can be useful as a starting place to create a black and white image, but there are other functions for that. Let's take this down because it looks horrible. There you go. Okay, so I'm just going to pull that up. So the next option we have is your curve function. And for those of you that really enjoy using curves, this is quite intuitive, that you've got control over the highlights and lights and darks and shadows. And also you have your option to put in an S-curve and points, and also with your color channels of red, green and blue. All of these are really great and very effective if that's your thing. Detail. This allows you to affect the sharpening, noise reduction and color noise reduction that you might have to fix an image somewhat. So there are already preset options. It's best to zoom in to 200% to see the effect of these, but generally I don't touch this. Yeah. Again, it's up to you. What is a bit more useful is the color mixer. So this enables us to, and this just changed the image for this. This enables us to be able to identify specific colors within the image and to work on those. So just say I want to work on the yellow there. So what I can do, I can adjust either the hue, saturation and lightness, or the color, so I can affect the way things are looking, but I want to deal with the HSL at this point. And I'm selecting the yellow, so I could take the yellow down to minimal or increase it to maximum. And you can see it's affecting not only the yellow in the ladder, but the yellow in the painting there. So I just want to improve on that a little bit. The hue, I can, if you find the hue channel that supports the color you're working on, I could make that go more towards the orange or to the green spectrum, but I want it to be slightly more green. And because it's somewhere between orange and yellow, you can also see that you're affecting it there. So I'm quite happy with that. And then finally, the luminance. I can make it brighter, don't think so, or slightly darker, just to affect it thus. Okay, so that's really, really useful. Color grading is something else that we might want to kind of consider. So again, I'm going to select another image to make it interesting, and I am just quickly going to go to the Basics tab, take down the exposure, take down the highlights, and maybe just increase the shadows a little bit, something like that. Okay, that's more in keeping. So where were we? Color grading. So this is quite interesting. So it kind of aligns quite nicely with Lightroom. And what's really useful, I think, is that you can select a color either through the control here, so we can see that we're pulling in with our shadows a different colorway. And again, I'm going to double click to take that to the middle. But you can affect your midtones, highlights and shadows simply by adjusting the slider to add the density, if you like, of the color. So let's say I want to give it a bit of a blue shadow color grading. And then with my highlights, I want to go slightly warmer to show the sun coming through. And maybe I'm just going to take the edge off that. That's getting there. And with the midtones, I think I just want to go slightly cooler, just to add something there and just to brighten it up. So you can see quite quickly I've been able to make a difference to this image. Up here you can deal with the individual channels, so you can see things a bit better. And this is the global effect that you might get if you want to select a hue and then pull in that hue to color grade in that way, and again you can pull that in and affect the luminance accordingly. So it's really, really versatile, and I think it's worth experimenting with stuff to find a look and feel for what your particular taste requires. Optics. So this is useful. Let's find a suitable image for this. This one up there. Okay, so oh, maybe that's not the one. Let's see what we've got. We've got something else up here. Have shot an image where you've used a wide-angled lens. Oh, I don't know if that's, yeah, maybe this one. A wide-angled lens. Actually, this is a good one for a few reasons. So if you've shot a wide-angle lens, you might get lens distortion, either barrel, or if you're using a telephoto, pincushion, or the other way around. But you get lens distortion that makes it look rounder or pinched. And first of all, if you click on Profile, it's a very useful thing to do to start off with. If you remove any chromatic aberration or use any profiles that you might have set, so you can apply the profiles of your camera and lens that you've used. Okay, and then also if I go to manual, we can see that that distortion and vignette is the same. So often with particular lenses it might offer a vignetting, which is this, and you can brighten that towards the edges. So you can adjust that as necessary and use it for creative effect or just to give you a well balanced exposed image. And distortion. So when we're dealing with this pincushioning or barreling, if you pull the image, so this is barreling at its worst, and this is pincushioning at its worst. So it enables you to kind of, if you like, fix that artifact. Okay. And defringing is something that occurs often with perhaps lenses that aren't either well calibrated or lenses that aren't such a good quality, where you can get a fringing, slight halo when you zoom into the image around the edge of details. You often find it, for example, if you're photographing trees in winter and against the sky, it's almost like a colour shift around the outside of the detail. So that's useful to know that you can affect those to suit. Okay, so this leads us nicely onto geometry, and this is very useful. So we can see here that we've got an image that is shot slightly on the skew, and actually I just need to sort out, there's a curve there, so I'm going to go back to the optics and just sort out that slight curve that exists there, I think. Okay, and then back to the geometry. Let's get out of there. Here we go, geometry. So you've got lots of options, and first of all you've got some options across the top here. A for auto kind of tries to line it all up for you. So the geometry is about looking at the straight lines that exists within the image and trying to match them up. So that gives us a fairly good start. Or you could go horizontal, and you can see it changes it slightly, or you could go to vertical, which thus far I think isn't bad. And grid kind of looks at all of these things, which is quite nice because we've got a tile 4, so that would be straight, but obviously these are off. And then you have an option which is to draw guides, and this means that what you can do is, say you want to make sure that edge is straight, you click and drag on the horizontal plane, and I want this table to be straight, and then I want the edges of this to be straight. So I go on the vertical direction. So it takes a little bit of working out, because you can obviously adjust these to suit, and I probably haven't picked a great example here because of the fact that these are off. cues. So if I uncheck shift guides, you can see what I've done. It's in fact it's a really bad example, sorry about that. But if I now clear the guides, and if I try and perhaps do it with the tiles, I might get hopefully a slightly better result. Let's see how that works. Okay, so this is brilliant, for example, when you're documenting work, a photograph from above, say in the copy stand, and it's square or oblong, and you want to just make sure that it's as square and straight as it can be. That tool here, the draw guides, is brilliant for that. And also you've got manual transformations here which can affect the keystoning. So that's our vertical keystoning. And our horizontal keystoning. So you can adjust your image slightly to make it work, and then you're kind of thinking, okay, what can I do to kind of improve that? It's a tricky one because this image has a natural skewed element here. Rotate. You can rotate to align something on the horizontal or vertical. And the aspect ratio is essentially, it means you can squash or stretch. I tend not to use that too much, to be honest with you, but good to know. And we can see here that we've got our transparency grid behind, which is no good. So you can change your scale to hide that. And what's useful is you don't want to lose all your image. We can see there's still a little bit down here. So what's really useful now, you've got offsets on the X and Y axis, so you can fine tune the scale of your image and get it right to fit within the frame. So a little bit of adjustment and you can get something that's almost there. Let's move on to effects, and basically you've got an option here for adding grain that replicates kind of film. It can look horrible, but if done subtly, can work dependent on your requirements. And the vignetting as well, it adds a vignetted mask around the outside, either ranging from black to white or somewhere in between. So it can be quite nice if you want to focus in on an element of the image. And then finally, calibration. So what is useful to know is you can calibrate your own camera to work effectively with Adobe Camera RAW. You want to ensure that the colors match up a little bit. Calibration is a difficult thing when you're working in an environment like this where there's lots of you've got access to lots of devices and printing options and stuff like that, but it's a really good practice to get into. Down the right here there are options. So this is our the settings or edit tab. Okay, here we have crop and rotate. So if I click on that, you can then scale to a predefined crop. Okay, so you can select an aspect ratio and even create a size and a scale to crop to. Okay, a shot original also, which is useful if you want to maintain consistency between the size of the images. And you can change the angle of the crop or the image around the crop as necessary. Okay, let's just pull that out a little bit. Right. Let's do. Right. And what's useful here for me to talk about here, so with the crop, sometimes it's easy to kind of get a bit clumsy and mess it up and not know where you are, so you can hit this return button to go back to what it was originally. And again, within this, you can flip, reverse, and turn it upside down should you wish. Okay, so it can do all of those things. Useful to know. What is a brilliant tool is this. So this is the heal and clone tool, and I would say out of all the kind of editing apps I know, that this is by far the best, the one in Adobe Camera RAW, and I'll show you why. So we can see here, there, and you can see how the cursor is now changed to a couple of circles. So let me increase the size. You can see there's a size there of the brush, and the feather affects the area outside of the inner circle as to how it blends essentially, and then you've got the opacity that you can adjust should you wish. Okay, so I'm going to use quite a big brush here, and can we see there's a mark just there which looks like either a dirty mark or it's more likely to be a dust spot that is on the camera's sensor. It happens, especially if you change your lens outside without due care and attention, and a little bit of dust or probably pollen sticks on your sensor. Okay, you can also use the square cursor keys to adjust this, which I prefer to do. So if I now click on this, so I'm using the heal function, and you can see we've got a red circle and our green circle, so I can take detail from anywhere, and it kind of uses that as a reference to hide that. If I was, for example, to use this, you can see it's going to give a really bad impression. But this is useful, for example, when you're working on an area where you've got a dust spot on something where you've got a contrast between colors or some detail. You can really kind of adjust things around to match up where you need to match up. That is invaluable. And of course what happens is you can put as many as you need, and you can see them all where they are, and you can see if you need to move them around individually just to make sure that they're able to be viewed. If I uncheck the overlay, you can see how clean that is. Put that back. And another useful tool can be useful when you can't actually see the amount of dust spots, or you suspect they're there and you're not quite sure. If you click visualize spots, you can see here that on this black and white inverted image that there are certain areas where it looks like there's spots. These are probably just spots on the floor, but it's quite easy then to scale down with the brush and pop through and kind of clean up these smaller ones, knowing full well that when I go back they're likely to be nicely cleaned up. Very useful tool. Just changing the game a bit. I want to go on this image, I think, and let's go back and just go to the basic tab and just take down some of that colour, pull up some shadow detail, bit of texture, maybe take down the highlights a bit. This is useful. So we've got a kind of quite hot spot there, that hot spot there where the light's coming through, and there's an area there where I ideally want to make some local adjustment. So this is where this comes in. And if I click on the brush tool, I can increase the size of the brush as necessary. Yeah. And this means that I'm able to, if you like, paint in a mask. So I'm just going to increase that size a little bit. I'm just going to paint in a mask there, which at the moment we can't see. So let's just check on that so we can see it. Can you see the mask there? Probably a wrong colour. Maybe if I make it green, we can see where we're going with that. Okay, it's expanded a bit more than I wanted to, so that marker here, if I click on that and hit delete, I can now change the size of that. And also, if I click on the arrow there, I can change the feathering and the flow and the density. So I'm just gonna take these down a little bit and see if we can kind of refine things. There we go. So there, just gonna refine that, and there. Okay, so they are both on that same marker. So anything that I now do, if I hide the mask, like exposure, it's just going to do that area. So let me go to extreme. That's horrible, right? But use subtly. Let's just take that down a little bit. Highlights are going to make a difference. And possibly the whites. Improve the texture there. Maybe take it down a little more. Okay. So just say I've overdone it. So you can see there are definitely changes there. If I click on the eraser, I can now go around some of the outside elements that I don't want to change too much. And try and kind of make that a little bit better. Again, this is just a quick demonstration, but I just want to show the possibilities, and it's going to take a little bit of kind of crafting to develop your own language of that. I've done this rather clumsily, to be honest with you. Like I said, just demonstrate exactly what it can do. But these are all the options, and many of these options here are available in the basics edit tab. Let's go on a different image, and now I want to go on this tool. So this is a graduated filter. I probably haven't got the appropriate image here, but essentially this allows me to drag in from one side. I'm going to do that in this case, and I want to kind of focus on what's going on there a little bit. So I'm just going to not make it too dark, but maybe I just want to improve on a little bit of saturation there, and just to apply a bit of focus to what's going on this side. And if I wanted to, I could then drag down and add a horizontal one. It's going to keep those same settings that I've got, so I can use quite a powerful tool to just affect what I want to say with the image. So this is really useful. For example, very simple way to think about this: if you've shot a landscape and the sky is slightly burnt out, slightly too bright, and you want to find balance within the scene, so it's quite a good tool for being able to do that. And again, it's got all of the settings as discussed previously, so you can really go to town should you wish. There's a radial filter that works in a very similar way, in the sense that you could pull out an area there, and you could kind of brighten or whatever. You could invert that. You could affect everything just to kind of make the focus, if you like, zoom in on the area that you want to be most important, I suppose. And there. So if I move quickly to another image, let's go for this one, and we can see here that we've got options there to remove red eye or pet eye. Again, that's pretty self-explanatory, but you can affect the pupil size. But with PETR you can also add a catch light, which is a reflection that you can put in. I can't demonstrate that at the moment because I don't have any pets evident. Snapshots enables you to take a snapshot of the image you want, and you can take a date of it and keep that there, so you can refer to that if you're working on stuff and you want to kind of refer to that later on. Could be useful. And then we also have presets that we can kind of go back to and select, similar to what we saw at the very beginning. And then finally, you've got some options here that could be useful. So we can see there that we've got the shortcut commands, but importantly, if I just copy the edit settings here and then select another image and go back here again and paste, you can see that it's taken all those settings from one image and paste it to another. So if you're trying to create a particular style or work with some sense of consistency, that can be incredibly useful. Also, so if we go back to this image, what we could do here is, just say I wanted to copy selected edit settings, so I can select everything apart from, say, the color grading, and copy, and then if I place this on this image and paste, we can see it's made changes without the color grading, which is useful to know. I can also go to reset to default, which takes me back to the original, and obviously use the shortcut keys. But what I find really, really useful is this down here. So let's go back to this image. If I click on this, this gives me a before and after view, so we can see and compare how the image looked before I edited it and after. So you can toggle through that, so you can see over split screen, nothing at all, left and right. You can see the options there. There we go. Down the bottom here, zoom control, so you can click just to zoom in and out. The hand control, same as using the space bar, allows you to scroll around your image. And then you have, you can toggle a sampler overlay, which is great for picking up colors, which I've identified here with the RGB codes, and you can select a grid should you wish. Just say I wanted now to process all or some of the images. Let's say these three. What I would now do is to go up here to the convert and save selected images, and if I click on this, I can bring up the save option dialog box. You can decide on whether you save in the same location or a new location, and then select the folder. You can change the document name here should you wish. The format options you've got are the familiar options there, including JPEG, TIFF, Photoshop and PNG. I would include all metadata, maximum, but you can also limit the file size to any size that you want as a maximum file size. Color space, Adobe RGB, or whatever you require depending on your output options. And you can also resize to fit. So if I want a 1600 or whatever maximum dimension on the long side, or any of these dimensions, I can do so. And you can also apply sharpening or not for screen, etc. Okay, so when you're happy and you're done with that, if I click save, you can see it's showing how long it's going to take there. And if I click done, and we will see these images should be here within Bridge. And if I go to sort by type, you can see that it pops right at the end there, which is useful. And if I click on this image, it should have saved the IPCT file information. However, I may have forgotten to add that to that particular image. Oh, never mind, it happens. So if I wanted to add metadata to this, I've already set up my template within Adobe Bridge. And if I control click and go to file info, here at the bottom got template, and if I click the debris show, clear, okay, there we go, we got there in the end. Okay, serves me right for not ensuring or checking that I hadn't applied it to the raw images, but I can now see that I've got that information there. And just to be sure, click on one image, control click, file info, and there we go. I've got all that lovely juicy copyright information and other stuff attached to the JPEG image. Perfect. Yeah, that was it really. Got a bit clumsy at the end because I wasn't particularly organized, but in a way that's quite useful because it shows you how you can kind of fix things retrospectively. So I hope this workshop's been quite useful for you, and if you do still use Finder as your browser, I'd really urge you to explore this, and I certainly couldn't live without it. Okay, thank you very much.